Hello, welcome to my bookshelf, and today I will be discussing my thoughts and feelings on the 1999 movie adaptation of Girl Interrupted. Girl Interrupted was originally a memoir, and it depicts Susanna's experience in the psychiatric hospital. She spends 2 years in there, and she kind of gives us some stories of her time there, and also just some insights she's gained. So it is a really interesting book, and if you want to know more about my feelings, I already have a video on that, so you can check that out. But I wanted to talk more about the movie in this video. So I kind of went into the movie knowing that they would have to change things because it didn't even really have a narrative, so to speak. It was just like, here's some things that I put together about my experience there, but it really isn't like a cohesive story. It's just some of Susanna's insights, which are interesting to read, but like I said, don't exactly turn itself into a movie. And so the one thing I really liked about the movie, other than the amazing performances, is just the fact that we finally get what I really wanted out of the book, which is we get Susanna's story of how she ended up in this hospital, and something that we didn't get in the book, how she recovered and got out of this hospital. Now, that being said, I know that the movie takes liberties with what is already in the book, so I really don't know how true or not true the events of her leaving the hospital are. And I think that's a pretty good segue into my next point, the changes. Now, like I said, there are some things that definitely needed to be changed, and actually there were some changes that I agreed with that made sense for the movie format. One good example of this is one of the many insights in the book is when Susanna is describing her thought process and how it pretty much just takes over her consciousness, if you will. Like, she's not able to do anything except for just think about whatever comes into her mind. Like, it might not even be directly related to what's going on, but she just kind of finds herself in this like rabbit hole. And she describes this a little bit in the book, but I thought the movie did a really good job, and it's actually towards the beginning, when she first is being assessed to see if she needs further treatment or not. And she's just talking to him, and all of a sudden we get a flashback to something else that, as far as we can tell, doesn't in any way relate to what they've been talking about. And then all of a sudden she kind of gets snapped back to reality because she spent so much time just like stuck in this thought without actually like being in reality. This shot like pans to her cigarette in her hand, and normally, if you ever see smokers, they kind of like pat off the ashes, so it's not like this long thing of ashes. But she has this long thing of ashes. She hasn't actually been like smoking. She's just been letting it burn down. And I just thought that was a really good visual of just showing how lost she got in her own thoughts. Another change that I understood why they did what they did, in the book they talk about this episode, if you will, that Susanna has, where it's kind of that thought process thing again. She all of a sudden starts thinking that she doesn't have any bones in her hand, and she gets so agitated, she actually like bites her hand to see if there's any bones there that will stop her. She just kind of gets lost in this thought process. But the movie decides to kind of throw that in at the beginning of the movie, and they put that with the aspirin incident, as I want to call it. The inciting incident that led to her being hospitalized was the fact that she took 15 aspirin, and she had to get her stomach pumped, and so the authorities assessed her to see if she was okay or not. The movie actually adds a couple things to this whole aspirin incident. So in the book, she just takes 15 aspirin. That's it. Nothing else. That's it. There's no bone incident. None of that. That happens later. So the movie, one, just moves when this whole no bones incident happens, and it moves it up to her aspirin incident. And they also add the fact that she downed a bottle of vodka after she swallowed these 50 aspirin, which again did not happen in real life. And I honestly didn't understand why these changes happened. Did they think that taking 50 aspirin wasn't crazy enough or something? I just didn't understand why they had to compile 2 extra things that didn't happen with that into that whole scenario. I would think that taking 50 aspirin and having to get your stomach pumped would at least alert people that something is going on here. We're not exactly sure what it is at this point, but something's going on. She clearly needs some kind of support. So I don't know why they added the things they did with that. It seemed unnecessary. Another change that I actually did like was the fact that we actually get to see Susanna writing throughout her time there. The book, it never really mentions whether she wrote anything at all during her stay there. It's not said one way or the other, so we don't actually know. And I kind of like that. I think it really just showed how much she enjoys writing and how big of a release writing is for her. This really doesn't have anything to do with this movie. It's just a Winona Ryder connection. So I'm sure everyone is aware that Winona Ryder also stars in Stranger Things, which is an amazing show on Netflix, by the way. Shout out to that show. I love it so much. Anyway, if you've seen that show, the song, Will I Stay or Will I Go, plays through a very important scene in one of the episodes. And actually, it is a scene with Winona Ryder's character. And I just thought it was so interesting that in this movie, Winona Ryder's character, Susanna in this case, she's talking about what ambivalence means with her therapist. Winona Ryder just goes, will I stay or will I go? And I was like, oh my gosh. The connection was just too perfect. Wow, mind blown. I don't know what it means. It's just really fascinating. It's just a cool connection at least. So I just wanted to throw that out there. A fun Stranger Things tie-in with Winona Ryder. So I think from here on out, I'm going to talk about spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie, I don't want to spoil it for you. So do not watch the rest of this video if you don't want to be spoiled. So now I think I'll be jumping to things that they changed that I was frustrated with. I just was not a fan of. One of the things that's shown throughout this movie, and is something that is also present in the book, is the fact that nurses will come along about every 10 minutes to just check, to just make sure everything's okay, that no one's hurting anyone. And so every single 10 minutes, like into the night and everything, they do these checks, and it's actually done a lot more, it's mentioned a lot more in the movie actually than it is in the book. Yet, there's some plot points in the movie that seem to just forget about these checks. There's actually two big scenes that happen when a whole bunch of the patients there leave in the middle of the night to go into these tunnels, which the tunnels actually do exist. It is mentioned in the book, but there's definitely never a scene where everyone just goes to the tunnel in the middle of the night. That never happens. I mean, the first scene that we see them in this tunnel, they bowl. There's this room with this little one lane bowling alley, and they all take turns bowling and having a blast. That's gotta take at least 30 minutes, an hour? And then after that, they explore the tunnel some more, and they find one of the therapist's office, and they go through their files. And they're just kind of chilling, just casually sitting on the couch, just reading their files. So they must be gone for hours in the middle of the night, yet no one notices, even though checks is something that happens throughout the entire movie. They just ignore that when it's convenient to the plot, I guess. And I do understand the importance of the scenes in these tunnels. There's a lot of camaraderie among the patients, and also in that one scene we find out a little bit more about borderline personality disorder, which is Susanna's diagnosis, and she kind of reads off what that means from one of the books in the office there, and they kind of have a little bit of a discussion about what that actually means and does it apply to her or not, and all that kind of stuff. Another thing that I was not a big fan of that they changed. So Daisy's character, actually a lot of what Daisy goes through is something that actually happens to her, and that is discussed in the book. The change that they made is having Susanna and Lisa escape the hospital and then end up at her apartment and harassing her. It kind of leads you to believe that that's kind of why she committed suicide. That was kind of the breaking point for her. So in the book, Daisy's father does get her her own place, and she lives there, and she does commit suicide tragically. But we don't find out the circumstances surrounding it. And in fact, Susanna never actually escapes the hospital. It's Lisa that runs off sometimes, but there's never ever a connection between her going to Daisy's. And I don't know how I feel about having Susanna and Lisa be in some way responsible for this suicide. I mean, I don't want to say responsible in the sense that, like, they should feel guilty, but they are putting them in such close proximity to when it happened, and Lisa was completely cruel to her. I mean, I don't think it would be right to ignore their actions towards Daisy and how that fits into why she did what she did. I mean, wow. Lisa is so cold and cruel, especially in those scenes, and we never really see that in the book, and it just is taken to an extreme level. I mean, after they find Daisy's body, Lisa rummages through her pocket and things to steal money from her. I mean, there's just no respect at all for this other human being, and there's completely no remorse for her pretty much encouraging her to do what she ends up doing. And that was just so... ugh. I like that it kind of gave Susanna a catalyst to change and to really take her therapy seriously. But because I know that didn't happen, I'm just curious to know what actually did push Susanna to get better during her stay there. Because this clearly wasn't it, because that did not happen. So again, I know that they wanted to make the movie more dramatic, so they added that scene in, but it just kind of ruins the integrity of the story to me. It's not true. It's very dramatic and very horrifying and shocking, but I mean, people can get better without that kind of extreme thing happening to them. I was not really a fan of that change. It was kind of jarring and just odd to me. I do like how in the movie we get to see how close Susanna does get with the other people there, because I did get some of that in the book, that she did feel connected to these people to some degree, but it was nice to like actually see it more, because again, in the book everything is so disjointed and there's a lot of insightful things, but most of it isn't really about Susanna herself. It's about what people go through in this kind of place, and there's a lot of stories about some of the different people there, but again, we don't get much insight into how this affected Susanna. We get a little bit here and there, but really not a lot. So it was nice to kind of give more to Susanna and really flesh her out as a character and as a person. And there's just two more kind of like random changes that they made that I was like, okay, not really sure. So after Susanna goes back to the hospital after the whole Daisy incident, she brings back Daisy's cat. Now again, this obviously is in the book because she never leaves the hospital. But just kind of a random thing, like, I know this is the 60s, but are they really allowed to have pets in there? I just would think that would be a huge hazard on so many levels, mainly to that cat. And I was really worried when the cat was missing, actually. I was like, oh no. Like they did something to the cat to get back at Susanna, and I was like really devastated. But thankfully, nothing bad happens to the cat. And also, that whole scene with them reading her journal, that obviously doesn't happen either because, like I said, there's no mention of Susanna actually writing anything down in the book. So we don't actually know if that happened or not. But it did make a lot of sense for the movie itself, and I did enjoy it in the movie. Oh, and one change that I almost forgot to mention that I really, really loved was Valerie being a really important part of the story. Valerie is mentioned in the book. She's one of the head nurses there. We really don't get much interaction with her in the book, but I just loved her in the movie. She was just perfect. Yeah, she really helps Susanna through her recovery in the hospital, and I really, really liked her. And I really liked that Susanna had so many people on her side that were rooting for her to get better, and it was really nice to see. And it was also really nice to see Susanna eventually working with her therapist instead of being so critical, and it felt like a very big injustice to her that she was even in there and the fact that she couldn't leave. And I did like that they addressed that, because that was something I was unsure of in the book, is whether or not she could leave or not. And the movie directly establishes that Susanna, even though she voluntarily put herself in there, she can't leave voluntarily. So it was good to have that clarified because that was something I wasn't sure of in the book. Another thing that the movie did a really good job of showing us instead of just like explaining it like the book does was Susanna's wrist banging. Now, I had never heard of wrist banging actually before this book. I didn't realize that was something that some people did. And according to Susanna, it's something that's sometimes common with borderline. Now, admittedly, this could be outdated information because the book was written in 1993, I believe, so admittedly, that may not be the case anymore. Either way, it's something that Susanna used to do, and it's basically what it sounds like. Susanna used to just bang her wrist against usually a chair, and it was just, it's kind of a similar release to like cutting and things like that. It's almost like you feel very numb inside, and so you do something physically harmful in order to feel something, anything. So I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it. That's just something that Susanna talks about in the book. What I was just trying to say is that the movie shows Susanna doing this at the very, very beginning when she's being assessed. And they also mention it by name. I think one of the doctors, when she's having her stomach pumped, mentions that as well. Okay, so as you can tell, a lot of changes were made in this movie, and some of them not as good as others. It was really hard for me to separate the movie from the book. I tried to do that, but I just really couldn't. I do think, as much as I can separate it as a movie, I do think that the movie is a good movie, probably like a 4-star movie, I would say. I did really enjoy it, but knowing what really happened, you know, that was in the book, the changes were more upsetting for me as a movie watcher. Because some of them seemed unnecessary and really just, like, it was just like added drama. It doesn't need this extra movieisms in it. I feel like her story is good enough on its own without the movie adding extra drama in it. I really do think that her story is good enough on its own. So I didn't think it was necessary to have those extra scenes, especially with Susanna like escaping with Lisa. Not necessary to me at all. That being said, it still was a good movie. I couldn't get over some of the changes, but the performances in this movie were really, really good. So I would definitely recommend this movie to people who haven't seen it. Alright, so those are my thoughts on Girl Interrupted. It was interesting to see it be turned into a movie. And I think that overall they did a good job, but there's definitely room for improvement, I think, as an adaptation. But either way, I do think it was a good movie overall. So let me know what you think. Have you guys seen this movie? Did you like it? Did you not? And also, like, have you read the book? So yeah, just let me know what your thoughts are. Those are kind of things that really stuck out to me, having read the book first and then watched the movie. Alright, so thank you for watching this video, and until next time.